Hi, this is Roy Samuelson with another episode of the ADNA Presents. We are so close to having some new episodes for season 2 coming out very shortly, but in the meantime, it's so cool to be able to revisit some of these conversations that have happened some almost 3 years ago. This is yet another example. Anna Capezerra from Deluxe. She shares all the insights and perspectives that she brings to her craft in the world of audio description. Take a listen in, and as usual, this is for Kevin. Welcome to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series. Today we have a special bonus episode, Anna Capezerra, the manager of the audio description writers at Deluxe. Thanks for joining us, Anna.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Let's jump right in. What do you love about audio description?
I moved to LA in the fall of 2008, and I moved out here to pursue a career in screenwriting. So I'm a big film and television fan, and I sort of stumbled onto an audio description job posting and didn't know that much about it, much like many of us who get into it. And it just sounded really great. I really love the idea of getting to write scripts that help bring movies and TV, which are things I'm very passionate about, to communities that don't have access. And I also have sort of a service background. I did 2 years of AmeriCorps. So I really love that there is just sort of this joining of being a part of a service industry. And then also I get to write, which is what I moved out here to do. And I get to work on television and movies. So it's a pretty cool thing. And it definitely, I've enjoyed sort of stretching my wings and learning about different ways to phrase things and complicated situations, and how do you go about bringing clarity to something like Inception or, just very visually complicated projects. So I think it's been a really great learning experience, and it's even helped me, in sort of honing my screenwriting skills.
Can you give some examples comparing or maybe even contrasting between the screenwriting skills and audio description writing? Are they similar? Are they different?
They're pretty similar. I mean, I think broadly they're similar in that you need to know how a story unfolds, being aware of plot elements and what parts of the plot need to be described. If we had all the time in the world while writing description and didn't have to fit it, we could just write about every single detail that we see, and that would be pretty cool, though lengthy. So, when you have limited time, really understanding the breakdown of this shot and what's important and how does it contribute to the character and the plot. And I found that to be really interesting in terms of what I already knew, but also just looking at the visuals and breaking them down, and just sort of understanding even more in depth than I did from screenwriting how to sort of orient shots and focus on different things. So that's been pretty cool as a broad thing. And then more in detail, sort of, screenwriting uses a lot more fragments. It can be a little more, I think, like poppy or something like that, and a little more slang. And audio description, we try to stay a little bit more technical. We don't want it to be dry. We want it to be exciting, but definitely we want to make sure we get the visual information across in a way that doesn't always completely have to be conveyed in a screenplay. So,
And with the audio description scripts that you write, specifically with those visuals, it sounds like as you're breaking down the story that you're having to make a lot of decisions just because of your limited time.
Yeah, definitely. It's complicated, in movies that are very dialogue heavy or scenes that are dialogue heavy, trying to determine, what information is more important, the dialogue or the visual, what elements can the listener not understand that are necessary for the plot or the character. And so sometimes, as you know, we have to write description that may go on top of dialogue, and we just have to decide, is this dialogue important or is the visual, is that a priority in terms of just understanding what's going on. So that's very complicated, and it's definitely an interesting puzzle. And I certainly ask colleagues a lot of the time, just to get another set of eyes, because sometimes you've been watching it over and over again. So it helps to have somebody who can kind of have a fresh outlook.
And it sounds like that perspective and your experience can just bring the best when it comes to the writing.
Yeah. So it's a really, I continue to learn about writing audio description and get better and learn from my peers. And it's it's a really cool process.
Can you think of any specific example of a challenge within the world of writing audio description scripts that you're really proud of how you overcame it?
Sure, I think there are two different challenges that are especially difficult. One would be a movie like The Tree of Life. That was really during my newer years too, and it has like 20 lines of dialogue and it's so abstract in all these places. So it's just almost wall-to-wall description, which for a narrator can get so exhausting too, as you know, I'm sure. But that was really interesting. We also didn't have a color version. So we watched a lot of trailers to try to figure out what we were looking at. And for me, it was a lot of asking other people with more experience, just what are some good words for this gaseous nebula, or, all these sort of things that I just hadn't had to think about what the words are to get that visual across. So that was really complicated for me and interesting, and especially just so much writing and just how do I phrase this abstract, strange thing that I'm looking at. And then other times, security is a big thing. So maybe we don't see the full video or the final video, or we have to work on location at a lot. And that's where we get to see the video, but then maybe we have to go back without video and try to write what we've taken notes on and fit it in between dialogue, because maybe we'll just have the dialogue track. And I think that that can be pretty difficult also, since you don't have a video, you can't ask other people, what does this look like to you? Can you help me describe this? It's just sort of trying to figure out what works best, and it can be a little bit of a difficult workflow. So I think that those are pretty tough because the timeline's also usually tight. And all of the staff writers on our team at Deluxe and Burbank have done these sort of on-site projects, and everyone's been able to experience this difficulty. But you totally understand it. You don't want to, they want to protect stuff like Star Wars, and so going on site makes sense. But it can be a different process than we're used to and a little slower, but it works out. It seems to work out so far that I know.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about your staff, decisions that you've made either in what you look for in a writer or when you choose a writer for a certain project? Maybe a general brushstroke of what's important to you?
Yeah, definitely the ability to write full sentences is the first most important thing, grammar and things like that. We really try to start with the basics and then move up from there. So do you understand what audio description is? Can you write grammatically correct sentences that are also accurate, that are concise? Do you know where to put them and how to time them out for the narrator to read them correctly? And then can you break down the scene and the visuals and determine what is really important? So you'll have new people who will tell you what color every person's shirt is, and they won't tell you, that someone grabbed a gun in the background, and that's sort of a big thing. So trying to help new people kind of get used to that, we'll train them and test them and go through a pretty rigorous process, just trying to help them understand those elements. So we really look for people who can master those things, which we see as sort of the basics. And then after that, it's, can you write poetic sentences? Do you have a larger vocabulary? If you're going to do a movie about aliens, do you have the ability to find the words that are going to vividly express what the visuals are? I find aliens personally to be kind of complicated to describe. So it's just sort of, do you have the resources? Can you talk to people? And do you have your own sort of bank of phrases and words that can help you? And that'll definitely play into also how I assign the projects to people, just because if somebody's newer and they haven't quite gotten around to sort of expanding the vocabulary and sentence structure and getting a better flow for the writing, they may do something more simple like a kids show that, doesn't require quite as much in-depth writing skill. So that's sort of how, and then for the staff writers that we have in Burbank, they've been doing it long enough. They can pretty much do any kind of project that's there. So sometimes I try to see, is this person really excited about this movie and do they want to work on it? And if I can, which is not that often, but when I can, I try to give them things that they'll be excited about, because I think that's also really fun as an AD writer, and I think it brings something out for the listener in the end to just have someone who's so enthusiastic about Harry Potter or Avengers or something to just, they'll have all this information that someone else might not have.
I love the combination of making sure you break it down and the resources, and then you said enthusiasm, a passion almost that definitely can be heard in the words.
Yeah, definitely. And I've found that more people who are just really into TV and movies, which is great because there are so many people in my generation who are, the more people watch, just usually the better they just are inherently because they've had so much exposure to film and television, which is what we're describing, versus, if you read a lot, that's also great for your vocabulary, but it's a different medium, so it can be a little more complicated if you're just not, you can be a big book person and not a film buff. So it's sort of a great, a combination of all these different skills.
Can we go back to some of the newer writers and maybe the assumptions that they have of what an AD script is? What's something that you find coming up a lot with those new writers that need some adjustment?
Something I think people don't realize very much is that there are a lot of sound effects that don't need description, and there are a lot of sound effects that do. And trying to discern which is which, I find really fascinating. We always try to give this example to new people when we do a training seminar. If you say someone gets into a car and then we hear the engine, you don't need to describe. They put the key in the ignition, they turn the key, they start the car, they drive away, because we all know what that sounds like with the context of the description you've given. However, if they're just walking in the house and they grab their car keys and you just hear jingling and you don't describe it, who knows? Do they have coins in their hands? Did they pick up car keys? So that needs description. And I think turning your brain around to understand how much information we fill in from what we see, I think is a really big sort of jumping to conclusions because we can see elements. Just trying to have an accurate script, I think, is sort of a new way of thinking people have to adjust to. Before learning about audio description, I don't think we thought that much about how many assumptions we make from what we see, and if it's accurate and if it's not. Usually it doesn't make that big of a difference, but we'll have a teacher who's looking at papers at a desk, and I'll have new writers say they're grading tests or they're grading term papers, or they're really jumping to this conclusion that we can't confirm at all. And so, we're like, well, if you don't know, that could be wrong. So it would be better to say she works at her desk because that's accurate. And I know it's not as specific, but it's definitely, you just sort of filled in that information.
Undoing a lot of assumptions and making sure you're keeping aware of the context. This is why I'm given a script and I just read words.
Well, it takes a lot to read it right, so.
Where would you like to see audio description go from here in your dream world, based on what you know?
I would love to have it be, just completely pervasive throughout all content, anything visual, but specifically for my job and my involvement for all television and movies and anything, even, little shorts on Quibi or anything like that. I would just love to have it be as widespread as closed captioning. And I would love for there to be more education in the public about audio description, obviously, but also just what it takes to create audio description, the writers, the narrators, the consultants, and that it's sort of, people think it's like closed captioning, or people think it's like some other jobs like transcription. And I think for me personally, I would love to have there just be an understanding of it's a pretty skilled job for both writers and narrators, and just an awareness of that.
The way that you've shared this entire interview definitely goes into that nuance that makes it's so much different than the access that closed captioning brings.
Yeah. And it's way more complicated than I think anyone thinks originally. And so, I have friends who don't understand it, and they'll say, you get paid to watch movies and TV, and that's basically as far as their brains go. And I've even had some of them test and train to be AD writers, and then they're just like, this is too hard. I didn't know I was going to have to do so much work. So it's just so interesting that even my friends don't have a full understanding. It's going to take some time, I think.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I've loved hearing about people's experiences on that Facebook page. That's been really cool. And I definitely always love hearing from people who use audio description, what they like and what they don't like. It's really interesting because there's some movies and shows that are huge and everybody watches them and everybody loves them. And I always think about, there are smaller movies that may sometimes be more difficult, but not as many people see them. And I would just love to hear more about anything anyone sees, just to get a gauge. It's an ever-evolving skill, I think. So it's really cool to just learn what other companies do, what consumers like, what kind of narration they like to hear. I just think it's really great that there's now this sort of space to give feedback and opinions and just talk about accessibility with audio description in general, because when I started, there wasn't really as much of a forum. So I've really enjoyed being a part of that.
And it's great to be able to see that beyond just in the world of audio description, does it have it or not, that these kinds of conversations that you're engaging in, the feedback that you're getting, it's growing audio description in a way that everyone's kind of evolving it.
Yeah, definitely. It's been pretty cool to watch it grow, and it's been doing it for decades, but I really think it exploded once Netflix started doing it, and I've really enjoyed watching it evolve and become more widespread. So I'm hoping that'll continue.
How can people reach you, either on social media or otherwise?
I look at that audio description discussion Facebook page a fair amount, so they can definitely contact me that way. And I think my Facebook itself may be private, but I'm on the page, so if they put my name in there, they could find me. And they can always email me at work at my deluxe email. So it's Anna, ANNA, Capezerra, CAPEZZERA at bydeluxe.com. And I definitely would love to hear people's thoughts, because it's always really helpful for me to learn from other people what they think and what they like and what they don't like.
You said what they like, so you do appreciate hearing the positive feedback.
It's very encouraging. It's great. And especially, for anyone who sees some sort of random small movie, that's really nice, because I think those writers are sort of unsung heroes that if they didn't do an Avengers movie or something like that, maybe they don't get quite noticed as much. But just as a side story, because we do go to screenings for quality control before stuff goes out into the theater, and my colleague did the description for the movie The Lighthouse, which is just such a strange movie and a lot of really interesting things going on. And I just sat there listening to it being like, I don't know if I could have written something like this. This is amazing. And so I think it was, really cool to get to hear his work, because we don't always hear everything that we've done and our friends have done. So it was really nice to just hear it and enjoy it, and hope that whoever watches that movie will enjoy it as well.
Thanks so much, Anna. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.